Our first meeting, our first order of business, sorry, is some out-of-state travel requests. The first is for the Ships Baseball Florida request. So who is speaking to us about that?
Bruce is here to provide a summary of kind of the why, what, and how, and then answer any questions. So appreciate him being here. Appreciate the work. So
sure. Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I'm Bruce Nemiker. I'm the head baseball coach at Lincoln. I'm in my 25th year of doing this. I'm also a teacher over at Wilson Middle School, bio teacher. I have a couple parent representatives with me, Jason Cherney and Dana Weck. Their children are on our baseball team and here just to escort our request to take our varsity baseball team to Florida. So you guys have packets in front of you. You're all capable of reading to save a lot of people's time here. Everything that, you know, the why, the what, the how is all listed. I could talk for hours about, you know, why we're going. But I think honestly, the best thing to do is maybe ask what questions this group has about this trip.
Is this during spring break?
It is, yes.
Okay.
The idea is to leave the Monday of and return the Saturday of.
I guess my commentary would just be this is a wonderful opportunity for our students to even travel. Some students may never have that opportunity. And also it's my understanding that you will do a lot of the fundraising for this event. So it really just costs us, if I remember correctly, in providing the supervision that's needed for the trip. Is that correct?
that is correct. And we connected with Angel, and she's prepared to have some dollars set aside to make that happen.
Okay. Which, given, I will just say, which given the number of students who will be able to participate, which is how many?
Currently, there's going to go, there's 18 invites out,
Okay.
possibly a 19th. We have a Japanese player
Oh.
who just is at our building right now, and he's been working out with us. And so we're thinking about extending an invitation to Junpei, so that potentially 19.
Nice. So I think like cost per student to have that supervision seems kind of minimal. Right, if I know correctly how much that would be approximately. So guys, do you have any questions?
19 is the roster that you want to bring?
Correct.
And 4 coaches?
Correct.
Anything else? What's that?
Just those people. Correct. Yep. Just our varsity roster. Our junior varsity rosters will stay in the confines of the JFK and wait their turn.
I'm trying to get you to 20, is what I'm saying.
No, well, yeah. So
Former players.
Just trying. Alumni. Pitching coach.
Right.
I've had a lot of parents ask to be that at chaperone.
Do you have any questions, sir?
Yeah, I'm curious. Well, first off, great job with the program.
Thank you.
So it's really exciting to see them. I just started following you guys last year, and it's pretty cool to see what you guys are doing. So great job to you and the team.
Thank you.
I'm curious, how much do you anticipate with that fundraising? Do you think you'll be able to raise enough to cover most of the costs, or do you have any insights on that?
Sure, Tony. So we had this all set to go. 2020, we're all set to go. We got canceled 48 hours before we were about to fly out. So, so thinking back, I was talking to Dana and Jason outside about that. I think at the end of the day, after fundraising, I believe it was somewhere between $400 and $500 out of pocket per family, per player. The rest was fundraised. Yep.
Do you have an itinerary at all? Or have you kind of?
Yeah, so not like an official one from Jackie Robinson, but like I can tell you what the typical day is. So what happens is I meet with Jeff Biddle, who's the coordinator, and we kind of like figure out like what works best for like our team. And then it's a jigsaw puzzle because there's tons of teams down there. So people are playing games, people are scrimmaging, people get workout time. So like our typical day, if I have my pick, is we work out from about 8:30 till noon. Obviously meals and all that thing that goes along with there. And then also have some things happening later in the evening on the baseball field. And then obviously all the downtime, the facility that we're going to has everything that makes it really easy to be on site and do a lot of team bonding, a lot of getting to know each other right on our site.
Thank you.
Okay, if there aren't any questions, guys, if I could hear a motion to send our baseball team to Florida next spring break. I mean, welcome.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. No nays, so that motion is passed. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thanks for your time, you guys. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
bet, have
Thanks
fun.
for being here.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for waiting.
Absolutely.
While we're transitioning here from, with people, I just want to mention that I apologize that our meeting is running so late, and I want to make that public because we were dealing with some heavy issues here and had to be in closed session, so that's why our meeting is starting about 35 minutes late. So I apologize to the community for that. With that being said, we're moving on to another travel for staff approval. No, I didn't say that right. Another staff members travel approval. Okay, so next is David Bowman, who is part of our music department, would like to have the ability to go to New York and be part of the Met. It will require 3 days of hiring a substitute teacher while he's gone. Other than that, I believe once again that all the expenses are covered. So Lee, if you'd like to speak to that?
Sure. Lincoln High School has been part of a program with the Met. That will be in our 11th year. There's only one school in the state of Wisconsin that gets to go for free, and it's us because of our longstanding tradition with this program. So each opportunity that we have for, in this case, Mr. Bowman, he goes out there and they go through the 4 different operas that will be performed, what curriculum standards that are applied with those opera pieces. And then when they occur throughout the course of the year, 35 of our students get to attend virtual. If they're virtual, but for free, 35 of our kids get to go to the opera. You know, and there's 4 different ones. So he said that there's typically about 80 to 100 students who are interested. And so it's nice because they'll all get to go to one. And then he does some lessons with them, helps connect those curricular things. He said we had one, you know, it's not just music. We had an ELA standard once. We had a social studies, economics one time. And so he's able to sort of can make those curricular connections with the kids when they do these performances. But this is just for him to go out there, get the training for those operas, and then he comes back and facilitates the opportunities with the kids throughout the year. It's a great program, and we're very lucky to be a part of it.
Any questions? No. Okay. Well, then I would like to hear a motion to accept the travel for David Bowman going to the Met this next year.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Motion passed.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much,
Thanks,
Lee.
Lee.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That is a great opportunity.
Yeah.
All right. The next is our middle school science resource adoption. And with that, I think Pam is speaking about that one.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you have the document, the proposal in board book. Really what we're looking for this evening is I'll review what the team put together in terms of the proposal. But this would be step 1 of that process, and really the request would be the board's consideration of opening up the resource for a public review so that we can kind of get this process going. So the science team at the middle school has been utilizing iQuest, which is, I shouldn't say just iQuest. 7th and 8th grade use iQuest. 6th grade has brought over from elementary. When they came over, they brought over the curriculum that they use. And so you'll see a reference when it talks about the resources. There's some additional resources that are used at the 6th grade level. But what they found was that when they went to iQuest, that was the resource that was most aligned to the NGSS standards, those next generation science standards, which we have adopted as a district. And so it was the curriculum that was most updated at the time. What they're finding is that there is a new resource, hot off the presses almost, because it's 2022 is when the middle school version has been developed, and that is called OpenSciEd. And as they've started to explore that, they've seen that they believe that those resources appear to be more engaging and more directly aligned to a lot of the skills and practices within the national or the next generation science standards. So they're requesting that we consider taking a look at piloting those lessons over the course of this year by taking a unit that they already worked on in iQuest and just replacing it with a similar unit from the Open SciEd. The interesting thing about the Open SciEd is that it's actually free. So there is no cost to it. We do purchase iQuest. The cost would be if we want, all of the materials are available online, but if teachers want a bound book so that they can have something hard copy, these are about $10 a piece for the unit for teachers. So when I talked with the science teacher, you know, it's minimal just because rather than having everyone print it, it's probably worth the $10 just to buy it. So that's the only cost that would be to this is, again, if teachers want that hard copy resource instead of going online. But all of the materials are available online. The team has, met last year. A few of them found the resource and started looking at it, dabbling in it a little bit. And then this year when they met at the start of the year, had a broader conversation about the resource and what they were thinking about it. Those that dabbled with it a little bit provided something as a collective team said, we'd be interested in piloting at least one unit per grade level. And so that's really what the overarching proposal is. You see in the document, the standards, there's just, the team went through this summer and did some review of their standards and made sure that their standards, their power standards, were what they believe are most crucial at each grade level. And so you see that there as a part of that work over the summer. They again took a look at, from that criteria standpoint, they were looking for a resource that really aligns to those practices and those skills that are a part of the next generation science standards, because it's a new way of dealing with science. And so really rich in that inquiry-based approach, and that's what the resource connects to. It gives students a guiding question, and then they spend some time exploring it. And there's resources that go with it, videos and things like that, that are a part of the resource. I did include in here just the reference to what they would be looking to implement for each grade level so that you have an idea. So sixth grade would be looking at thermal energy, and then they would, that would be the one unit that they would for sure all implement. But if they have time to explore, there's another unit called light and matter that aligns with the sixth grade curriculum at this point. Seventh grade is looking at actually doing 2, potentially 3, because they feel that there are 2 units within the Open SciEd on chemical reactions that are connected to each other. And so they would like to implement both of those. And then the third that they would look at as an option would be Earth's resources and human impact. And then 8th grade has Earth and Space Science, which is this unit, and the option to look at plate tectonics. One of the reasons why they're interested in piloting a unit is to see how students respond across the board, 6th, 7th, and 8th, but also if they were to move forward to do a broader adoption, they would be looking at trying to readjust the scope and sequence, because Open SciEd has the units, same units across middle school, but places them in different grade levels. And they didn't want to do that at this point. They wanted to see first, is this really the resource that we want? So the proposal would be, could we open this up for public review, come back in 30 days to the team and provide some feedback to the curriculum committee in terms of, did we get anything? And then if at that time the board so approves or the committee so approves, we would move forward with doing the approval of a pilot and implementing those units this year.
Just for clarification, you said that Open SciEd is free.
Yeah.
So if we should move forward in the future and adopt Open SciEd as maybe one of our major curriculums, does it continue to be free? Or what kind of cost would be involved maybe some training or some workbooks?
Actually, right now, there is, so everything is free, including there are training videos that are part of the professional development option. And so in talking with our student learning liaison for science, he is looking at, if the board approves this, that he would utilize those staff development days to draw the team together around doing some of those professional development videos so that they understand what are the nuances to this versus the iQuest that they're most familiar with, and making sure that they're comfortable. But all of those resources at this time are free. I can't tell you, Kathy, if they will be at some point, not, because right now,
But as of the,
right, they're free. So we would phase out iQuest, and so our costs there would be reduced. From
thank you. Any questions, guys?
Thank you for putting this together. I was curious, it mentions here that there are some concepts that are currently underrepresented or missing altogether from the scope. Just looking at that at the bottom of page 1 underneath the rationale,
Mhm.
the change, is that specifically laid out anywhere in here? Or
No.
can you speak to that?
I think what they're saying is in our current scope and sequence, they don't go as in depth into all of the things that are present in the open SciEd units and that really get at those next generation science standards. And so in talking with the team, they said, you know, we want to make sure that we have the most comprehensive alignment to that. And so the iQuest, just because of the nature of the resource and because it kind of came into existence at the same time as the next generation science standards. It doesn't have the same scope and detail as this. And so that's why one of the things that drew them to that. I can't speak to the specific content pieces of it.
Yeah.
But the team from talking with the leadership, the team was looking at it and saying, this is just an evolution of how to implement those next generation science standards that they believe is just much more detailed. And again, they want to pilot it to determine, is that actually the case?
Sure. Yeah, and I think what would be helpful, if we go through and do the review of your proposing, it would be great to see just a quick, side by side on what are the things that they're talking about, just to make it a little bit easier to compare it.
Is there any further discussion or questions? Okay, with that,
I just had one question.
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Does this replace a textbook? Like, as I'm looking at this, there's write-ups, like they're written. Is that how iQuest is now too? That there's no actual book, but you click on this lesson and it has it all there?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. That's all I want to know.
Yeah. This here is the teacher's manual. And that's why it's that some of the teachers prefer to have it this way versus the electronic, but yeah, everything for the student is.
In this system. Okay, thank you.
Okay, with that.
I got another quick question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So is this a brand new curriculum or program, or is this being used anywhere else right now?
It's new in terms of the middle school units have been developed in 2022.
Okay.
So what I understand the nature of the development was the people that wrote iQuest helped with the next generation science standards. So some of those folks developed iQuest as a way to implement those. Some of that group broke away and developed this as an even more in-depth way to develop that. So it's new in terms of this did not exist at the time that we looked at iQuest, and it didn't exist last year. So 2022, the process.
Yeah, so I guess one thing I'd add is just as we go through this process of due diligence, I would ask that we just keep in mind that we're obviously wanting to raise achievement wherever we can, and if you guys feel that this is going to be the way to go, certainly that's something that we want to consider. So thank you for bringing it up.
I know our science team, they do dig into our data and they spend time talking about the best way to actually engage kids in that inquiry process to build those higher level thinking skills, but also just to engage kids so that they're motivated to, explore right? This is based on exploration. And so one of the things that they pointed out is that starting with a question draws kids in sometimes, where if you start with, here's the text, here's the information, sometimes kids shut down, but the question piques their curiosity. We can get them exploring.
The point of clarification, so you would be asking to pilot thermal energy, light matter, Earth's resources and human impact, chemical reactions in matter, chemical reactions in energy, Earth and space, plate tectonics and rocks. So, is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, and then where would you like to pilot them?
At both middle schools. So,
At both.
yeah, Washington and Wilson, because it's the middle school science curriculum.
So if they're being put at both middle schools, how is this a pilot versus an implementation?
The pilot is that there's an entire scope and sequence that's much more comprehensive, and it's linked in here. And so they're looking at taking, as I indicated, in sixth grade and eighth grade, a unit and replacing it with the option, if they have time in their curriculum, to be able to add another one. Seventh grade, because it's chemical reactions, they want to be able to do both, because there's two that go together looking at chemical reactions. So they already teach those topics in iQuest, using iQuest in their scope and sequence. It's just a different way to teach them that this resource provides. And so they wanted to start small for two reasons. They wanted to make sure that as everyone implements it, that they as a team feel real comfortable that this is meeting the needs for that. And then also, as I indicated, at some point as a team, they have to talk about how to move, because the scope and sequence for Open SciEd puts a few units in different grade levels. So for example, if seventh grade teaches it now, it may move to sixth grade in the Open SciEd. So they just want to be able to be thoughtful about making that shift over time versus saying, we're going to do it all at once.
Thank you.
What would be the disadvantage of only piloting at one middle school besides teacher conflicts with resources? Because what I'm saying is, and I could be completely wrong, but the data we could receive from having it going on at one middle school and then comparing it to the other middle school, would that be advantageous, or is that just completely wrong?
What I would say is that right now they're come together as a team on those staff development days. And so when they dig into their data and they talk about their practices, they're talking similar language because they're using the same resources. They're looking at a lot of those same things like the scope and sequence and things like that. So if we separate them, the challenge is that over time, either we got to have someone catch up because this becomes that, and we've got one group ahead of another, or they stay on their separate paths and it makes those conversations more difficult because you're approaching it from different ways. And so that's why we typically like to do, when we look at a resource like this, we'd like to do it as a whole.
And then
instead
just
of-
pick units.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember too that they've been doing iQuest for some time now. I'm not sure how long exactly, but so they're all familiar with that. So this is just bringing in that new system for a few units to kind of test it out. I mean, that's what a pilot really is.
Right.
So you already have some comparison because they already know the other one. Are there any other discussion or questions? that you
So
want to
the
add?
pilot would then be identifying whether or not this enhanced version would be the thing to stay with and potentially expand versus staying with what was originally developed.
So today, just to clarify, today the ask of the curriculum committee is for approval to put this out to public review. So what we would do is make the link to Open SciEd available on the website because those resources are available. And then I would put this similar to what we've done in the past up by Jody Pop for anybody that wants to come in and view the actual hard copy as well.
So the motion that I'll be seeking is for open public review for the middle school science resource materials of Open SciEd. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Tony.
I'd just like to clarify, it's to only the units that
Yes, specifically for the units,
that
but
I mentioned earlier.
yes, but right now, the actual open site ad would be, what we're making the motion on is to put it for public review, so that we have that 30 days for public to come and look at it.
For those units, not
Yes.
the whole.
Correct. Right.
Just to clarify that the public, because it is open, public is gonna be able to access all of the units. I can't limit the
Okay,
internet access, so
That's
they can explore more if they want, but
That's good.
well,
So I
then,
have a first on the floor. Do I have a second?
I just wanted to clarify, because I mean, you know, if you give people a novel, sometimes they can't read the whole novel. Maybe if you give them a few chapters, then they can look at the chapters in precise. That's all I'm trying to, not overwhelm people.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, and maybe if we do that public review, if we could just highlight the areas that we're considering piloting, just so we'll know what to look at, or just what's relevant near term.
Good idea.
I'm trying to narrow it in so that we can look at some and, you know, review it.
Same thing.
Yep, so I'm sorry for the complication.
Oh, it's a good idea.
I second it.
All right, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Those three of us said aye. It seems so silly to even ask that question. All right, so we have the motion passes. Thanks, guys. And then lastly on the agenda is we have to talk about and hopefully approve our plan for the MPSD disproportionality, which has been or will be sent to our
Did you
state.
want to do, sorry, right before that was code of conduct, before any updates? Did you say anything?
Oh, yeah, sorry, code of conduct updates. I don't remember what we're gonna say for that, do you?
I have some notes, yes.
Thank you. See, you're welcome.
So Pam, Kathy, and I just discussed really bringing some updates every month around the code of conduct. So this is this month's update, and if you have questions or inquiries about next month's update, just let us know and we'll add it to the update, okay? And so these are the thoughts that I wrote down as relates to the code of conduct. Is that our principals did a phenomenal job of sharing the code of conduct with all staff during that in-service week. And we have electronically shared the code of conduct with all parents via Infinite Campus. And we know that data is important to us. So we've really been collecting data. I talk about hard and soft data, right? Soft data is more anecdotal, hard is numbers. And so anecdotal data is that I've been in every school multiple times, unanimous that we're off to a great start. I had a conversation with a high school teacher today, talked about there's no battle with freshmen around cell phones. They just know, right? They know the routines from middle school. They want to get to the class, get to learning. So that's just one piece of anecdotal data. We also are collecting some hard data, some numbers. And so with that Infinite Campus message that had the code of conduct linked, there was also a Google form saying, I, as the parent, have reviewed the code of conduct with my children or child. And so right now, as of this afternoon, we had 500 of 4,000 possible select that button. So we're at about 12.5% of our total population that have selected that button that we have done this. Kathy, Pam, and I have also talked about this is not the final time we will do that, right? And so we'll continue to think about innovative or different ways to get the code of conduct to our families and encourage that conversation with their children. We also put together a staff survey around the code of conduct. And there were really 4 categories of questions. And as of about 2 hours ago, we had 204 respondents from our staff. And so the first question was a rating, 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, around please rate your understanding of the purpose of the code of conduct. And so 4 and 5 were the highest. So we, as of this afternoon, we had 76.5% of those 204 respondents rate themselves a 4 or a 5. And I'll put the numbers in the minutes. The second question is the same rating scale, but rate your understanding of the levels of behaviors, that matrix, the tiers. And again, we had 71.1% rate themselves a 4 or 5. I think that's reflection of some great work. In the concluding portion of the code of conduct, it outlines some classroom-based interventions that are suggested that the teacher could try. So we just took that list and asked folks to rate which ones of those do they use most often. And so 89, I looked at the top 3 and the bottom 3. And so 89.7% of respondents said that they are teaching classroom or school expectations in their classroom. Great, right? 85.3 said they use reteaching the positive expectations as an intervention. And then the third piece of that top 3 was 82.8% said they're having individual student conferences to discuss behaviors. So what that tells me is that we're teaching or reteaching, and then we're having individual conversations with students about things that they may have a concern about. I also looked at the bottom 3. So only 19.6% said that they are using a buddy room intervention or neutral site for reflection. So that means really removing a student temporarily to go into a buddy classroom or quiet space for reflection. So 19.6. 29.4 said they're using meditation as an intervention. And then 32.4 providing a reflective activity. So that's the bottom 3. We're really going to use that data to celebrate some of the things that are going on, but we'll also use it to identify some areas that we can do some professional learning, right? And so that survey closes this week, and when it is closed, that'll be one of the things we bring back here. So we'll share all the data. And then I just wanted to talk about some next steps as it relates to the code of conduct. Kathy continues to just do a phenomenal job of facilitating the ad hoc, and I believe there's a meeting in October 24th. We continue to talk about this 5,500 club and how do we get that off the ground. And we know we will get really cool t-shirts, but we haven't finalized the plan on how to get those people involved, but we will. October 14th is an in-service day, and we will meet with leadership teams from every building, and we'll talk about academic work and behavior work and how do we collaborate across the district to really positively impact both. Like I said, we'll continue to bring updates here, bring that survey data when it's closed. And then the last thing I wrote was we're really just have this opportunity to collaborate with Lynette Seminar and how do we join forces to really positively impact teaching and learning. So appreciate your collaboration.
One other thing I'd like to add is I've also asked our fantastic interpreter team within the district to translate the code of conduct into Hmong and Spanish. We kind of rolled it out pretty quick at the start of the year, and it's a big document. And so they're working on it, and once that's available, then we'll have that to be able to share with our families who need that additional translation.
Yeah, and thanks for thinking of that, Pam, and having that done.
They looked at it and they did say, there's a lot of words.
Yeah.
So not tomorrow.
It did take a day to put together, so that's for sure. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks to you for keeping the student behavior in the forefront, because we have made that a goal. So, thank you for doing that. So,
We'll bring these type of updates every month.
Mhm.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Now we can move on to the district personality section, and I'm going to let Katie Eichmann is great to explain that, along with Lynette did a lot of the work putting our plan together. So instead of me goofing up the words and what it means, I'm going to hand it over to the two of you. So take it away, girls.
Thanks. It's just to give and provide a brief description of what our special education racial disproportionality process is. It is an annual DPI data collection that takes place that disaggregates data around all disability areas. It additionally then applies some criteria to that process that looks at the specifics around discipline, special education identification and other specific categories. It looks at placement of students with disabilities, et cetera. So it's an annual process where DPI reviews public agencies and looks at how we are identifying students and then disaggregates that data based on specific disabilities. This is the 4th year that Manitowoc has been identified as a district that has racial disproportionality in regard to the amount of our students that identify as Black, that are identified as having IEPs in the area of an emotional behavioral disability. So when we are identified as one of those districts, it is required by DPI that we do a root cause analysis to really kind of look at why we are identifying this group at a greater proportion than we are other races in our district as having the need for an IEP in that emotional behavioral disability area. And then it asks that we propose a plan to address this. So Lynette will be here to speak about the specifics of that plan. As Kathy said, she's done a ton of work in regard to looking at what is required that really will address not only this specific group of targeted students in our racial disproportionality, but our lowest 25% of performers in general. So there's some really good research-based information that Lynette would share with us. I think the big part of this racial disproportionality is our requirement to spend allocated federal special education dollars in order to address this non-compliance or this issue. We will receive a notification on September 30th, which is why we're here today, for your approval to move forward with the plan, because we have not spent our allocated money this past year, and we are required to spend more prior to the end of October. These allocated federal dollars make up about 15% of our special education budget, and it totals about $700,000. And Lynette can share some more details about what we have spent the money on, what we plan to, what are some requirements as far as where that money is allocated to. So I'll let her share the details of that. And thank you again, Lynette, for all of your work.
So the plan that I have shared is kind of a cumbersome document to navigate your way through. There are 2 different parts, and they're summarized in part 3, where all of the pieces are kind of put together. So that's kind of the place that I wanted to just kind of point some things out. That starts on page 9 of the plan that I shared with you. So the first 2 parts, again, they're just summarized and kind of pulled together in that 3rd part of the document. This is the document that would actually be shared with DPI for their approval. That's the final step in this piece. This needs to be approved by DPI before our funds are allocated for this year, for that budget that we were mentioning. So the first part of the plan is just really looking at some of our school district data, and that focuses on the achievement and engagement and attendance data for our Black students specifically, because that is our racial disproportionality group. So you can see that we, myself and some other staff that I work with across the district, pulled some of that data from WiseDash. We looked at our school report card data, and kind of put things in that we thought pertain to the achievement, the engagement, attendance of our students that might be contributing to this disproportionality. I put in some data about our suspension in there as well. So that's that first kind of table in there. And then starting on page 11, there's some data about a survey that we have done over time in specific regard to the work that we are doing in this plan. We have surveyed staff. There was a pre-survey done before our first plan was enacted, before my position started. And then I have done that survey with our staff the last few springs to kind of show over time what staff are saying about the things that we're doing, and to try to show where we're growing, where we need to focus more. Then you can see on page, skipping ahead a little bit, some of the things are kind of summarized here on page 13, where you can see the long-term goal. It's just kind of bringing everything together, that what we want to see and what this plan is focusing on is really looking at our student achievement, attendance, and engagement in our district. We want that to resemble our overall student enrollment, that we won't have any group over or underrepresented. And that would again kind of continue to decrease the disproportionality, which we have seen that go down over time. Our risk ratio was at, I want to say the year that we were identified, it might have been over four. So that would be a student would be 4 times as likely as any of their peers to be identified and be receiving EBD services. And now we're at 2.5. The threshold is 2. So we're seeing that decrease over time. The ultimate goal is that we want to see that kind of level out, and that our enrollment, our population in any room, in any program would look like the overall enrollment of our school district. So that's kind of the long-term goal. We're going to work on that by reviewing data, participating in, and doing professional development. This plan has really been intentionally interwoven with a lot of the other things that we're doing in the district. I participated in ad hoc over this summer, developing the code of conduct. I've been collaborating with Jason and Pam. All the schools shared their behavioral goals with me, so I tried to really be intentional about making this plan inclusive of all of that work that's going on in the district. So some of the action steps that are listed here, I can kind of give a little bit more detail about. Several of them have been in place over time. This is the 3rd plan that's been written. The first one was written before I came in the district. So my position comes out of this allocation of funds, as well as we have people in each building. They're called general education behavior specialists. And it's an additional stipend position that some of our full-time folks kind of take on, where they're doing additional work like on their prep time, before school, after school, going and working with their colleagues, helping to develop plans for students, mentoring students, doing all sorts of different things. So those positions, that stipend for those people comes out of this as well. So that's kind of something that's been being proposed to continue. That's the first piece there. We've also been over time doing some professional development, not probably as much as maybe was initially proposed. The first plan was written pre-COVID. So professional learning has looked like we've supported verbal intervention, which we did across the district for pretty much all of our staff, except for people who missed for different reasons. We've been doing some work on educator self-care, trauma-informed practices, restorative practices, and we're also currently working on right now a shared drive for bringing together behavioral support strategies. So that's something that we're working on as well. Equipment and materials has been a large thing that we have spent money on so far, providing materials to schools, flexible seating, adjustable standing desks, noise canceling headphones, smaller items. We also this summer helped to, out of this budget, help to fund some sensory room spaces at Lincoln, Wilson, and Madison specifically. And we've also purchased materials for spaces like that at other schools. Also in here, again, mentioning, it references strengthening our MLSS, which is looking at those different tiers of services to support students. What are the things that we have that all students have access to? What are the things that for when students need a little bit more? And then what's at that top level for students that need the most intensive service? So this plan would support that as well. Family engagement we added in last year, and we were able to do a couple of things, like there was a bingo night at Madison that was very well attended, that I was able to help support through this budget. There's some different things that schools are looking at to continue that this year, to kind of bring our families back into our schools a little bit more. And then also there's a new item in there this year, looking at, again, that multi-level systems of support over time that I've seen. I'm proposing to develop and pilot a wraparound system that I would pilot to provide some intensive case management to students who kind of at that top level of need for behaviors across the district. I have some resources, and my background as a school social worker, so I have some knowledge in how to case manage. So that's something that's new that's in this plan as well. And I just want to mention as well that, you know, our disproportionality is for a specific group of students. And I think Katie mentioned this too, but our goal with this plan is to really impact a large number of students. It's not just targeted at a specific, it's to really strengthen the supports that are available for all of our students and strengthen the skills of all of our staff as well. So.
Okay, any questions?
Okay.
Any questions, Bess? Go ahead, Colin.
So I'm just gonna throw it out there. Last year when I was on the board, I took a significant interest to this plan, and I was very disapproving of the plan that was presented last year. One of the items that was on that, and I have it up right now, from that plan was providing professional development on cultural responsiveness, examples of equity bias, microaggression, and white privilege. The next one, and this was presentation, materials and notes for professional learning. The next one was also restorative justice. So is that in this plan? Is that going to be utilized? Any type of things along those lines in this plan?
That was not in, there was no reference to equity or bias in last year's plan. I think you're referencing the plan that was written the previous year before I was in the district.
Okay.
So that might have been 2 years ago.
It was it might have been because the training session planned completion date to that was 6/30/2021.
Yeah, so I think that's the plan that was written before I was in the district.
Okay.
We're focusing on, again, like bringing together the work that's going on across the district.
Okay.
And the work that we've been doing with code of conduct, we're working on the multi-level systems of support. The 360 plan is a part of that. Teaching and reteaching expected behaviors, that's a universal. Developing wraparound. So it's really looking at what are those best practices and what are we doing across the district that we already have in place? What are things that we're missing?
Okay, thank you.
And this references this specific details around some of those instructional best practices that will really connect all of the things that
I
we're
appreciate that.
supporting as a
Thank you.
district. So thank you for the question.
And that how will things like, we're talking about physical items like flexible seating and standing desks, how will that help our disproportionality? Like, how do you see that?
So our
Yes.
disproportionality has always been in the area of emotional behavioral disabilities. We also actually additionally last year had an additional identification for any student who identifies as Black in any area of special education being suspended from school basically too much without having the exact terminology in front of me. So we don't have that additional identification this year. Our belief is that we need to have additional strategies available to students who might display different behaviors than their peers, perhaps. And having students sitting at a desk works for some kids. Having additional options for people works for some kids. I have a stand-up desk in my office. Sometimes I like to work at my stand-up desk, right? Sometimes people walk around and talk while they're meeting with someone. So having those options for students to try to meet their needs, because we know that differentiation, meeting different needs of different students, especially coming back from remote learning for some students where they were working in all sorts of different settings, just helps to meet all those different needs that students have. So that's why having a stand-up desk available to a student where you're noticing, oh, it seems like you're having a hard time sitting. Let's try working over here. We also have in some of our elementary, maybe not our high schools, have like little lap desks that kids can sit on the floor with and read or draw. At some of our middle schools and high schools, they've ordered, they're called like bistro tables. So they're high top tables where students can stand and work together. So there are all sorts of different resources available to try to meet all those different needs that students are coming to school with.
So I'm hearing your plan includes improving things for all students.
Yes.
But we do have a disproportionality problem. So specifically, what are we doing for those students who are in that disproportionate category of being Black? Like, are we doing anything specifically for them to help them like maybe come off of that plan? Or of course, being an art background, I latch on to the fact that we have very few students who are in like art and music, those kinds of things. And that's a concern. So like, what are we doing specifically in those areas? Like, how does the plan address that population?
And you bring up a great point, because part of the goal of special education is to provide a student with the skills and abilities through supports and specially designed instruction to eventually not necessarily need to be identified as a student with a disability. So part of this is that provision of those best practices for all teachers, a multi-level system of support. And then some of the, extrinsic tools that we provide for students to be able to make the general education learning environment just a place where all kids can be successful. So specifically targeting that group. It's a great point, because when we are targeting our lowest achievers and our lowest performers, that will get to that group of students. But we will be intentional with our special education service delivery to make sure that we are collecting data around what is working for our kids through our IEP goal development and our data collection process. And our goal is those that are already identified, because that's what we have right now, is an over-identification, that we will put the plans in place through the IEP team process that will help support kids and maybe not necessarily needing those tools and strategies. The emotional behavioral disability criteria also recently changed in the state of Wisconsin. So it's very similar to now identifying a student with learning disability. It requires a significant period of time of the implementation of standards, research-based practices and interventions, and then collecting data on the effectiveness of those in order to move forward with a special education identification. So there are some more criteria requirements in order to identify a student as having an emotional behavioral disability, which this plan will also. The goal is to put things in place to avoid having to go to that referral. So this supports that as well.
So we're on, sorry, Colin, we're on year 4. What is it going to take for us to not be on that list?
We're getting closer. We're going down.
Yeah, but what do we have to do to get to that point? What is the actual goal?
The goal is so our risk ratio is what determines this. So the goal is to be below 2.0 or close, and to keep showing that decline. And we're at 2.5 right now.
So we're close.
We're close.
And we
And
used to be 4?
yeah, I have, in my most recent thing, it was 3.36 3 years ago, but I want to say it was maybe about that, like the year that we were first identified. My most recent identification only shows 3 years, and this is our 4th year. So I think it might have been above that, but I didn't have that with me when I was writing this. So I could be misspeaking, but we've been on a decline.
We've identified many strategies here in terms of some of the things we're seeking. I'm also thinking in terms of, do we know what is contributing to that decline of all the things that we considered?
Yeah, and I think that we have our hypothesis of what we think is working and what we've received positive feedback from staff on. So that survey that I've been doing with each spring has shown, one, we showed a significant increase in behavioral strategies, professional development. It was 98% of staff that responded last spring, because we had just done verbal intervention for all of our staff. So we're doing those things. We're giving people more tools. We've also shown that staff are very appreciative and happy about the things that we have put in their hands to help meet the needs of students that come from such varying degrees of, what they need that's going to work for them, and to have multiple things to try. So that has also shown that people are appreciative of those things, that they like them. They're saying, yes, we have some, but we need more. So those are the things that we're seeing a positive return on those surveys. And that's our hypothesis, that they're having a positive impact, and that we can continue to do more of that and see if we see that it's continuing that downward trend.
Colin?
So you just stated that there was a more stringent guideline due to what it takes for a classification of IEP, correct? Is that partially going to then lead to those individuals no longer being in the program due to the standards being more stringent and possibly exiting the program as a result of more stringent guidelines?
That would apply to initial referrals for special education
Only.
only. Yeah.
Thank
There's
you.
a different process for determining that a student no longer is benefiting from the specially designed instruction.
Great,
So
thank
that's
you.
a good question.
Right, but there are annual meetings every year where, you know, a student's eligibility for continuing services, that happens annually, or if a student was thought to, maybe they could be dismissed from special education, then the team would meet and discuss that.
Okay.
It sounds like, if I'm hearing you right, that what we're looking into potentially is gonna specifically address all of our students that may fall in this category. You know, one of the things that I'm concerned with, frankly, just looking at the whole way the DPI is approaching this, is I'm not sure I agree with their approach. You know, I think it's almost too much of an approach based on identity. You know, it's really just saying, you know, hey, these students, you know, they might be Black. And I think it's just using that to suggest that that's the reason why we have to address the issue. In my view, I look at it like any child in our district or in our community that may fall in this category, regardless of their skin color. You know, we should talk about the proper way to support that. And I would certainly support any initiatives or programs that would help improve things in this area. But I just wanted to, I guess, just get that out there. And it sounds like, from what you're saying, that's the approach that you've taken. It hasn't been, you know, rooted in this identity-based model, which I disagree with. And I think we should focus more on just all the students that may have a need, you know, regardless of the color of their skin, are going to get the right support from our district.
And that is the approach that we have taken, is we haven't just said, you know, we're gonna buy something, but it's only for these specific students. It's, you know, of course, we want to target us, you know, we have an identification that we are liable with this money to address. But also, if we see a need for a student, we're not gonna say, well, no, you can't. So we're trying to impact as many students as possible. And as Katie mentioned, there is a significant budget that we have available to enact this plan and to support our students, to support our staff. So
Can you speak a little bit more to the, I'm just reviewing this stuff on the root causes here.
Mhm.
And, you know, I see like the family and community engagement, which I think is a great.
you're
little-
speaking of the root causes or the
Yeah.
action steps?
Yeah, I'm looking at the root causes now, but
Page 3.
yeah.
Okay.
And I agree, it probably is the root cause. But I'm not sure if I haven't had a chance to fully digest this. I don't know if there's anything specifically outlined here to address that.
For family engagement?
Yeah.
That's one of the action steps that we added to the plan last year.
Yeah.
And that's something that we're continuing to talk about. Again, I have a person and then our secondary, we have 2 staff members who have that additional stipend position. That's something that we're continuing to talk about, is how we can target that. And like I mentioned, one specific example that we were able to do last year was Madison had a bingo night that the budget was able to help support that. It was very well attended. I think Kathy, you were there. I think I saw you in pictures. Yeah. So those are things that we're talking about, is how to continue doing some more of those things to bring our families back into the schools. I think that's, you know, a challenge after having gone through health protocols and things. That's something that we're continuing to talk about, is how to continue bringing our families in so that they feel that sense of ownership and community and partnership with their schools.
And we have to spend $700,000 on this. Did I do that right?
Right, so when the budget money is allocated, we have 26 months to spend that. So we have some money that was initially allocated that we haven't spent. And that is the what we are technically in non-compliance with, but the DPI is being lenient because of knowing that with COVID and things that plans weren't necessarily enacted with what was initially planned. In the first plan, there was a lot of thought that professional development was going to be done in the first couple of years. Well, when we were doing different learning models, that didn't necessarily happen. So that's why that money is still sitting there. What we have right now in the budget, I got this from the DPI, so I haven't gotten this exactly from the business office to verify exactly, but the figure that I have from them is 475,000 currently, and will be allocated about $230,000 this year, which is again 15% of our special education money that we would be getting in special education funds that's being set aside to address this plan.
Thank you for being here. I just want to say, I don't want to put you on defensive at all. I'm just asking questions. So
Yep.
that's the first thing. Second thing, what are we doing at McKinley right now for the students at McKinley?
What are we doing at McKinley?
Yes, last year and in this year's budget, what have we done?
Okay.
That's the first thing.
Every building has one of those reps, so they have one of those as well. We have purchased supplies. I know specifically we have purchased supplies for McKinley. I would have to look back at exactly what was purchased. They participated in all the things that I mentioned, like verbal intervention. That's been across the district. I did some book studies that I mentioned, educator self-care, trauma-informed practices. Some staff from their building were participating in those this summer as well to continue professional learning together.
Okay, my next question or comment is, I've had many reports from staff at McKinley that they need help.
Okay.
And it seems like this would be a great avenue to get more resources at McKinley for all the students at McKinley. I believe there's about 80, could be wrong. There's about 80 still in the program that are students there, not online, but students. And, they need help. They need more staffing. They need more control of the situations. Just that's what I've been told from employees there. So
Okay.
if you could follow up with that and look at that, but this seems like a perfect avenue that would hit that target of what we're trying to look for and what we're trying to get everybody's achievement up. I echo Tony's. I like how you presented your information. We're trying to get the bottom 10% of all of our students' achievement to be higher. And if we have to look, we can look at it at a whole perspective, but how can we get the whole 10% achieving higher? So, and if you have any other insight you'd like to speak of different vocations, now would be a good time. But I just want to emphasize the importance of all of our bottom 10-15% of our students' achievement going up, not just identifying by their heritage.
Right.
And the state will collect data around the specific details and the disaggregated data. And absolutely, I think our goal would be that in addressing that lowest achieving group of students, that we are supporting the needs of all of our learners always. And I know that's the goal of this group as well. And the McKinley staff would have ample opportunity or every opportunity to participate in the professional development that would come from this, and the general ed behavior supports that would come from this, and then any access to materials or resources they would need as well.
Just letting you know what I've been told from constituents.
Thank you.
Lynette, McKinley is where the most severe EBV kids are housed, is that correct?
I can speak to that. We have a program called the MCCP, Manitowoc Comprehensive Charter Program.
Yes.
It is a off-site, out-of-home district or homeschool placement for students with emotional behavioral disabilities in grades 1 through 8. Typically, those students have had the opportunity to, we call it kind of make school as restrictive in their homeschool as possible in order to meet their needs. We've put a number of supports and services in place. They typically have a very low teacher to student ratio, and it just becomes unsustainable and their needs become so great that they are unable to really effectively participate in their home school. So then their IEP team meets, parents are part of that meeting, and they agree to a change in placement to this program. Always, again, with the goal of putting supports and services in place for those students to at some point transition back to their home school. So yes, and I think there's currently typically anywhere between 6 and 12 students enrolled in that program at a time.
And do we know how many is our disproportionate students, are they mostly there or just across the board?
Across the district, yeah.
When is typical of, I guess 2 questions. One is when do we see the majority of people entering special ed for EBD?
There are referrals that occur ongoing throughout the school year. Typically now, because of new criteria, there is a requirement that there are 2 6 to 8 week implementations of a research-based intervention. First semester, there tend to not be as many referrals taking place initially because our teachers are getting to know students, they're getting to know needs, we're implementing interventions, we're trying everything in our power to prevent that special education referral. So there tend to be more second semester in the school year, just because of the nature of need.
Is there a certain grade level that we see this more at entering into an EBD?
There should be fewer in later elementary school, middle school, very, very few at the high school level.
Okay.
If a student is truly disabled, and meets that criteria through the due process of an evaluation, though that's typically identified pretty early on.
Okay.
So those referrals tend to get less and less as students progress.
Thank you. I have Matt and Colin battling it out with hands.
He's on the committee.
All right, Matt.
Do you have data, that represents the percentage of students coming off of EBD?
Being dismissed?
Yes. Thank you do you have any data that the district, follows?
I can get that.
I would like to see that.
Yeah, I can get
Because-
that.
Are you talking about
I'd like to see
criteria for
what?
dismissal? Are you talking about criteria for dismissal or how many students have been dismissed?
How many students have been
Okay.
admitted or brought in under an
Identified.
IEP and then brought out before they graduate?
Before they graduate?
Yes,
Yeah, we can-
I
we
would
can
like to have that information.
So, and Katie, you referenced the goal to bring them out of McKinley where they're part of that MCCP program. Last year, we had the elimination of the LAP program. And that was kind of to my understanding, and I might be wrong, it was an almost transitionary, where they had some of this specialized education, and then they would also be part of the Lincoln school as well. I believe that we cut that due to funding. Am I correct in saying this? And if we did, would this be an avenue that this transitionary piece could be put into play?
The Lincoln Alternative Program was more of it was typically students with disabilities did not participate in that program. It was a program for credit deficient students, usually at the junior, senior level, that struggled to attain their credits in a traditional manner. They were an at-risk student, so to speak. So
Okay.
traditional participation at Lincoln just wasn't what was best for them at the time. They had different goals for what was next after high school. So moving to that LAP program that was off-site just allowed for quieter, smaller environment, smaller student to teacher ratio, that sort of thing. Students with disabilities, because of the independent work requirement of that program, typically didn't have the opportunity to participate in the LAP. So they're just kind of two separate entities. We've developed enough resources at Lincoln through alternative options that students no longer necessarily needed to be taken out of our building proper and then moved to a different site in order to have those needs met.
Okay, thank you.
Easy.
You know, with our choice students, students coming in or out, do we see a higher number of students possibly that would be impacting these numbers? The students that are coming in,
You're referring to transferring students that would be,
are they, that would be, IP'd or with behavior plans or?
we were talking about this earlier today.
We can find some specific
Yeah.
details around that information. I know our program support teachers collect, transfer and data on an annual basis, so we could look at some past and current enrollment transfer. I think last year, that we tend to have a pretty even in and out. I know last year, for sure, we had more transfer-ins of students with disabilities than we had leave the district. So we can get some of those numbers.
That 230,000 we have to spend this year, right? Did I understand that right? Is that all gonna be allocated on these action plan items, I take it?
So we have 130,000 that we are technically out of compliance. Is that what you're referring to?
The stuff that we need to. spend for the
Yeah, so on September 30th, we'll be notified we're in compliance, but that's just saying, please, spend this money. We don't, they're not gonna take it away from us. So that is, and then we also have the funds that were allocated last year that we have not spent. So that's about 400 some thousand dollars.
470, right there.
Yeah.
470.
So I have talked with Angela in our business office about different ideas of how we might spend some. It's a large amount of money. So we're going to be focusing that on this action plan, but if there are other things that we can do as a district as well, that's something we're talking about with Angela.
Yeah, I'd love to see details of that. And if possible, if we could share that. Is this publicly shareable information?
So the plan itself has some protected information in it that's protected by the DPI. That's why it hasn't been publicly shared.
Okay.
That's something that Katie and I can check into though. And
or a version that
Yeah.
we
Redacted
want.
version.
Yeah, that would include some of that.
Would you be able to share with our committee? I'd love to see the specifics when we get it, here's the 475K or whatever we gotta spend this year, and here's what we intend to do with it, and then here's all the associated documentation or materials that we're gonna use.
And I'm assuming, guys, that will also go through finance and budget then. All right, are there any more questions?
Yeah, I just wanted a scope of use is what I wanted to call it.
Right, are there any more questions or conversations that we want to have regarding this?
When, so when do we have to have that figured out by? Is that this month or?
If you vote to approve this plan, then this will need to go to the full board next. Ideally, I think we have to have this to DPI for their approval, probably mid-October at the latest. So we're in a little bit of a time crunch.
So that they have to approve the plan, and then there's like another step that I have to go through in their system to put other things in, like to pull pieces out of the plan out. So it's a multi-step process. They ideally want all of that done by October 30th for the DPI. And then once all those pieces are completed, then they will allocate our funds for this year. So
What happens if we don't meet that timeline?
then I would have to contact the DPI about what are we going to do if we're not going to meet the timeline. That would be a conversation in depth.
How soon could you have a detailed plan to us by?
And you're asking for specifically,
Yeah.
more specific details around where, if we're going to implement some sort of professional development, what specifically that would be. Just some very specific.
Yeah, I'd like to see, basically how we plan to spend $475,000 and whatever you're gonna submit to them.
Including some salary breakdowns, if that will be.
Yeah.
Okay.
That we have to talk to Angela about that and get together.
The time is of the essence that we do need to get this approved and so that we can get the ball rolling with DPI. So we're in
Yeah,
compliance
I'm not
because we are
suggesting-
behind.
Yeah, I just think we just need to see the details before we say, yeah, go ahead, but.
Jim?
With the, as your salary is charged off of there, we also have staff that are working on related behaviors. Is there a way that we can use some of our existing expenditures to meet that requirement? Because they
That's what
are,
we've been talking about, is if there's a way that we can utilize some of these
Right.
funds.
so it's not like an
Pers-
admin expense. We're really being able to leverage these funds because that's exactly where we've committed resources already.
Right.
Without being penalized.
Yeah, so we're not like gonna add a position without it going through proper channels. It would
But
be,
there is.
is there
potential.
another salary position that we could move into this budget?
This has happened like on
offset.
ESSER funds and stuff like that, in terms of where
Mhm. Yeah, that's what we've been.
All right, if there aren't any more points of discussion, then I would be seeking a motion to accept the MPSD disproportionality plan of 2022-2023. Do I hear a motion?
I don't think I'm prepared to make that motion until I see the details on the spend and everything.
Well, Tony, we do know how much money we have to spend. We're $130,000 out of compliance already now. And we'll be receiving 200 and how much, 70? Some that we will have to spend, we know that.
Yes.
But this is part of the plan. It doesn't include the dollar amounts, correct? I mean, this is just the plan.
Because DPI will receive this plan, and once they approve it, then they will allocate the funding to us after that.
Right.
So it doesn't include those specific numbers.
Yeah. So the plan never, from my understanding, if I remember correctly, the plan never includes specific dollar amounts at this point in the process.
And
That's
anything we would
later, after
purchase
our
moving
funds.
forward would always go through the finance committee. as well.
Yes, and that's when our finances are distributed from the DPI, are given to us, and then we decide how that's being spent correctly. I mean, the plan is how
yeah.
it spends, but the specific dollar amounts go through.
We're
budget,
just making a
finance, and
commitment through
curriculum.
this to DPI to say this is how we will be spending the money that you choose to fund.
Right.
No.
Go ahead, Colin.
For a point of clarification, if this were to be delayed further, would there be a possibility of forfeiture of those fundings? Okay.
And maybe all of our special ed funds. We don't know how much they would come down on this for it, so. This is a
Here's a
requirement.
risk.
We are required to put a plan together and have it approved by the MPSC and to move on for the DPI. It's an actual requirement that has to happen because we're not in compliance. So, I mean, we're just saying, do you like what you see here?
I mean, I think we're moving in the right direction based on the conversations we've had today, but I would like to see the details of, the programs and everything, before I just say, yeah, let's do this.
But that comes later. We have to approve the plan so that the DPI issues the dollars. And then at that point, we decide specifically, and correct me if I'm wrong in saying this.
Yeah, I haven't
So we
gotten
have
our
to do,
actual.
here's our plan, here's our
We'll get
worded
the
plan.
allocation after.
We have to approve it, it gets sent to DPI. When and if DPI approves it, they will give us the money to spend, and at that time, it will be determine how we spend each of those specific dollars. And so we will know as a curriculum committee and in budget and finance and make those decisions then. But this is our initial plan that we have to submit.
So if I understand you right, Kathy, before any programs or any money spent from the actual, once the funding gets approved, we still have an opportunity to review any programs or plans that would come out of this.
If there's
Right.
anything we are going to implement or any sort of allocation to salaries or professional development or anything, that would all go through committees prior to.
Yes.
Yeah, I understand what you're going after
Yeah.
here. I do. Ultimately, if we say yes now, and then if we get no follow-up, there's no recourse. That's what we don't want. So I entrust you to do your job, do your due diligence, and please follow through with what we've asked through right now. But I'll make a motion to accept the plan. However, we need to follow up, and this needs to be followed through. And I think that's the problem, that is occurring. So I'm not saying it's your problem right now. I'm saying that that's what's happened in the past. So I'll make a motion.
And I'll second that and just, please send the details when you get them so that we can review everything before we get into the specifics.
We can provide updates.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nay? No, hearing none, we have approved the plan.
Thank you.
So
all
thank
very
you for
much.
all your hard work, ladies. I really
you all.
appreciate it. I'm really happy that you're taking into account all students that are having issues with learning. That's really great. So thank you for all your work. All right, with that, I believe, let me double check, because we've been on this forum for a while. I didn't want to go off of it. So indeed, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Let's see. Okay, I just need to make sure I don't miss anything. No, we're good for adjourning. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll
Okay.
second it.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. I like to stand back there.
I do. It's okay.
Yeah.
With,
A lot of
Thursday
time
for
and
the-
effort put in on that one. let's be
Yes,
honest.
yes. It's at 6 p.m.
You know, it sounds really funny. It's good to hear you
Handouts.
talk.
slideshow.
It's a super cumbersome.